Internet fandoms are painful both to participate in and to witness from the outside. It really doesn't take much to set them off, and when they aren't destroying the lives of people who don't like their thing, they are militantly attacking people who like their thing the wrong way. Of course, the Critical Role fandom is not safe. D&D has seen a huge influx of people picking up the hobby without much to go off of, but what they saw a bunch of nerdy-ass voice actors do on Twitch. This is one of those stories, specifically the story of a Jester stan. Roll post. This is a story about a short-lived campaign I ran last year for a friend of mine, I will name Sasha, and her friends. They were super interested in playing a D&D game, but they had never actually played a game of D&D. And I had some time at that point, so I offered to run a D&D game for them. I worked and created this fantasy world based around a central theocratic kingdom that initially appeared to be a calming force on the continent, but in actuality were evil and were causing problems all over the land and stoking xenophobia to justify becoming a militant isolationist country. When talking to the party, they almost immediately started talking about how they love to watch Critical Role, and I was like, oh, cool I guess. I've never been particularly interested in Critical Role. I've seen some clips on YouTube and watched an episode where they hunted some frog demon in a circus, but it never really grabbed me. Personally, I'm more of a Dimension 20 guy, but not important. I didn't really think anything of that. Big mistake. Almost any time any of them did anything, they would go on a 20-minute tangent about something slightly related to Critical Role. There were even a few times where they'd be like, oh, this is like the time in Critical Role they did this? Are you sure you didn't watch Critical Role? No, I don't watch Critical Role. They didn't invent every fantasy world storyline. There were even a few instances where players would go to do something and be like, okay, so did you watch that episode of Critical Role where they did this? I would respond with no, and they'd go, lame. And once one of the players even went, God, this is so annoying. You really should watch Critical Role. We're trying to have fun here. Apparently my not watching Critical Role is inhibiting their fun, somehow. It goes without saying that Critical Role is an amazing show and has drawn a ton of great people into the hobby. But when it's your only exposure to the game, you won't fully understand it. That said, I do place a significant portion of blame on the players themselves, because even though they don't know the right thing to expect, they still know the wrong way to behave. I don't know what classes they were playing, but these guys fit the socially inept nerd archetype to a T. Roll post. Sasha was the worst offender of this. During character creation, Sasha began with, okay, do you know the character Jester from Critical Role? I responded with, kinda? Sasha then goes into detail about how she really likes Jester's personality and that she thinks the voice Laura Bailey does is really funny and that essentially Sasha's character is just Jester to a T. Literally even down to being a tiefling that is half genasi. The only difference was that Sasha's character was half fire genasi. I mostly just brushed it off because in my experience, new players often would rely on existing characters to base their first characters off of. This was a mistake. Sasha would always talk in a poor recreation of Jester's voice, but unfortunately, Sasha is not a professional voice actress, so it was not a particularly good performance, and it just sounded like a really bad Russian accent. If that was it, I wouldn't have had an issue. I suck at voices too. Okay, I get it. You're a first-time player and you need to rely on an existing character at first. Everybody does it. No shade from me there. To add to that, I don't even care about the awful accent, and I don't think anyone else really should. Like, you can't actually expect a fictional character from a made-up world to speak a real-world accent. That would just be unrealistic. But to circle back, I haven't heard of any first-time player just directly and blatantly modeling their character to be a perfect replica in appearance and personality, giving me the vibe that Sasha doesn't just want the game from Critical Role, She wants the DM, characters, and everything else. Roll post. Almost anything that she said or did had the tagline of, "This is what Jester would do, so this is what I do." She mostly used this to justify acting as an airheaded, flighty character that was just the definition of chaotic random. Now, I'm not super familiar with the characters in the Critical Role campaign, so someone will need to tell me if this is something Jester would do. The party was in the governor's mansion of the town they were in, and were getting a job to do something about the nightmares plaguing the town. I wrote the governor as this small, worried little man who is a touch incompetent, and when negotiating with the governor, Sasha gets annoyed that the negotiations aren't going anywhere and says that she wants to, grab the jewels of the governor and twist until he gives in and gives them the pay they want. I immediately tell her no, because one of the few rules I have at my table, one I mentioned at the beginning of our talks to run this game, is no sexual violence of any kind. Sasha rolls her eyes and says it really doesn't matter since, quote, he's a guy. I just remained firm and repeated, of any kind. And she just goes, ugh, fine, whatever. There it is. Betting 2 clams that everybody else at the table was also getting annoyed with Sasha. But did she stop and think, hey, am I being annoying? No, I'm not acting quirky enough. She needed to find the silliest, quirkiest thing she could possibly do to prove that she's actually Jester. And what's sillier and quirkier than sexual assault? What do you mean it's disgusting and scummy? What do you mean it's illegal? This is complicated now, back to the story. This happened a lot. She was a very impatient role player, but also tried to turn every interaction into a personal acting performance. Of course, because it's what they do on Critical Role. It was a dichotomy that did not work. She would rebound between dragging things out into a slog when all they had to do was talk to a priest about what he thinks is causing the nightmares. It was a kind of dream eater monster, by the way, causing what should have been maybe a 5-minute conversation into a 40-minute gallivant that resulted in nothing really happening and ignoring major NPCs and information, because she doesn't have the patience to talk to the court wizard for more than 7 seconds. The game fizzled out after a few sessions because I had just had enough of them basically trying to turn the campaign into some kind of Critical Role fan game. Much to their surprise and chagrin, not everyone watches Critical Role. TLDR, group of new players that are really into Critical Role play in a new campaign and try and make everything about Critical Role and get annoyed with me, the DM, because I don't watch it. One player just wants to be Jester in every single aspect. Wow, you know what would make their game even more like Critical Role? If they threw the problem player out on her ass. Trust me, the folks on CR had a that guy, and he did not last very long. Not to mention the fact that Jester is a lot of things, but none of this was it, Chief. So to Sasha, crawl out of the game, get back into the sex offender registry from whence you came, and never be heard from again. Let's finish this video off with a bang. A shorter tale of Crit Role fandom cringe. Roll post. This happened about 6 months ago. I saw a post on r/lookingforgames about newbies searching for a DM. As I usually love teaching new people the game that I love, I messaged the poster and expressed interest. They seemed very happy to have found someone who was willing to DM their group. I was invited into their Discord server and we had a get to know each other. They seemed very nice at first. We talked about my experience as a DM and theirs as players. All of them had only played 1 session before because apparently the DM they had then ghosted them afterwards. When I asked them what happened or if he was a bit weird while holding the session, Cleric and Fighter immediately started bad-mouthing the other DM. They said that he was stingy and didn't let them have fun. Also, his overall DMing style was very bad. When I asked for further details, they said that he didn't let them pick the classes and races they wanted, and also had a very boring presentation style. This was a red flag for me, but I was ready to give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, bad DMs are a thing, and maybe he wasn't patient enough for a new group. This DM is being more than reasonable on this front. I feel bad for people writing these posts and maybe feeling bad for not acting on red flags sooner or seeing them more clearly earlier on. But if we stopped every single time something seemed wrong, nothing would get done. So far, OP seems like a good dude. However, I'm not sure if anyone else has noticed this or if it's just me, but it feels off that the players say they were all ghosted by the DM after exactly one session. But they proceed to complain about him and his DMing style to no end. Usually, in these kinds of horror stories, the ghost is trying to cut off contact from bad people. But given that he had exactly one session with them and left, I'll bet this gang is gonna be insufferable. Roll post. After some more talk about different things, I started to tell them that I would like to run a heavily modified version of Princes of the Apocalypse. It would be a bit railroady in the beginning, but it would open up further down the line and become more sandbox style. They seemed fine with it. Then we started character creation. We had Rogue, Fighter, Cleric, Warlock, and Ranger. Everybody seemed happy, and I was too, seeing how pumped they were for the first session. We said it a week later. They were very active in their server, and I saw that they were all pretty hard into Critical Role, which is not a bad thing, but I knew that I had to manage expectations. You hear that, gang? OP is going to try and manage a crit roll stand's expectations. A noble effort, sure, but none so far have survived such an insurmountable task. But alas, let us commence forth. Roll post. When the first session rolled around, I said, guys, I've seen over the week that you all are pretty into Critical Role. I just want to say that I don't watch it, and...
You should! It's the absolute best show! Yeah, you should!
Me. Yeah, maybe someday. So anyways, I just want to say that you guys need to understand that Critical Role is a show and not like the real thing. I will try my best to make it as entertaining as possible, but I am not Matt Mercer. Rogue. We don't expect you to be. I for one just want to have fun. Me. Sure. I just wanted to be fair, and I don't want you all to have unrealistic expectations. The Cleric then mumbles something under her breath. I can't remember what. Can you stop that shit, Cleric? You always do this. Cleric. How about you shut up? A 2-minute screaming match started. Me. Yo, guys, what the hell is going on? Cleric. Just start the damn game already, it's nothing. Me. No, I won't start the game when 2 of my players are screaming at each other over something that seems to have to do with the game. So what's happening here? The Cleric and Fighter then disconnect from voice chat. Me, okay, what the fuck? The other 3 then explained to me that I was, in fact, not the second, but 4th DM they had found for this group. But every time they had one, Cleric and Fighter would criticize them for everything. Always comparing them with Matt Mercer multiple times and demanding the DM give them an experience like Critical Role. They had a talk this time around without me, but Cleric seemed to not care and start her usual spiel again. I thanked them for the info and told them that I unfortunately am not ready to deal with this kind of drama. Even if Cleric and Fighter don't come back, the damage was done. I didn't feel comfortable with their group anymore. So I apologized and wished them good luck on finding a suitable DM. Ah yes, the never-ending tale of the toxic Critical Role stan. A tale as old as the show itself. Critical Role is to D&D what porn is to sex. Yes, it's technically the same game you're playing, but the harder you try and force it to be this completely unrealistic vision, the more disappointed you're gonna be when you actually get there. Word of advice, don't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. But the new player just walking into D&D from Critical Role does not know this, and the worst of them show up at the table immediately expecting $1 million franchise, and getting mad when the Dungeon Master doesn't provide it to them on a silver platter. But that's what they always forget. They are so entitled that they demand a Matt Mercer when they won't be a Laura or a Taliesin or a Sam. Anyways, if you want to see more awful stories of games gone wrong, click the funny boxes over here. Till next time.